Sarasota County Bar Association is proud to continue its partnership with the Education Channel of Sarasota County to bring you the law in Sarasota.
Welcome to Law in Sarasota. This is a program dedicated to informing viewers about the legal profession. We hope to bring you insights into how courts work and the services lawyers provide, not just in the courtroom, but also in our community. This program is supported by grants from the Sarasota County Bar Association and the Community Foundation of Sarasota. And we're coming to you from the high-tech studios provided by the Sarasota County School Board and the Education Channel. Last year there was a sea change in the judiciary. 3 circuit judges retired and 3 new ones were appointed by the governor. The outgoing judges, myself included, had nearly 100 years of combined judicial experience. Now, when trial judges are appointed, the general public often knows very little about them. While the appointees are all experienced lawyers, many, even within the bar associations, may not have met or even heard of them. So who are these people who now wear the robe and whose office imposes such awesome responsibilities? We're going to meet one now. Welcome, Judge Iten.
Good afternoon.
So, you are now a circuit judge, and I'm going to be asking you questions that will show your background, your experiences, your family, and I'm going to make you brag a little bit about yourself. I know you're a modest person, but I'm going to have to ask that because people don't know about you. Let's start out with early childhood and tell us about where you were raised and about your family.
Well, I was born in New Jersey, and I lived in a small town called Washington Township for my first 8 years. And then my family moved to Tarpon Springs, Florida in 1974, where I started the 3rd grade.
Okay, so tell me something about your father and your parents and your siblings.
I have one sibling, a brother. He's 4 years my junior, and he works for Scripps News Service. And he and I are both graduates of the University of South Florida. My father was self-employed. He was in the used car business, and he came to Florida to escape the icy winters of New Jersey. So my mother, father, brother, and I moved here, well, I say here, to the northern Pinellas County town of Tarpon Springs. I attended elementary, middle, and high school there, as well as 2 years of college at St. Petersburg Junior College.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at Tarpon Springs High School, home of the Spongers.
Okay, well, that makes sense, I suppose. What kind of things, sports or activities did you enjoy in high school?
When I was in high school, I spent a year on the marching band, and ego got the best of me. When I was in middle school, I was the first chair drummer, and I was, in a prime position, but I had to start anew in high school with bass drum, and I decided that wasn't for me. I ended up spending a lot of time with public speaking activities. I was in theater, and I was involved in debate, and I got to hone some of my skills in that area.
What kind of plays did you participate in? Can you remember?
I remember quite vividly. Most of the plays had leading roles for women, so I never had a lead, but we had Diary of Anne Frank, where I was Mr. Dussel. In The Miracle Worker, I was Captain Keller. So I had an opportunity to perform on the stage on a few occasions.
You know, it's amazing how many trial lawyers have experience in the theater. So that was good training for you, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
All right, so you graduate from high school and then you go to St. Pete Community College?
Yes.
And what did you study there?
Well, I was pursuing primarily just my associate's degree with the goal of going to USF as a transfer student. I did take some criminal justice courses as electives because I was interested in pursuing a career at that time as a prosecuting attorney.
Okay, so now you go to USF. Is that for the final 2 years?
Yes.
And what were your majors?
I majored in public relations, which is a subset of the mass communications department. And at the time, I thought I could possibly be a public information officer for a law enforcement agency. I knew I would ultimately go to law school, but I also knew it was an expensive endeavor. So I planned to take a break between college and law school and save some money.
Okay. So then you decided to go to law school, and where'd you wind up?
I ended up at Florida State University College of Law, but I didn't go there immediately. I initially took a job after college at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. I went to a National Law Enforcement Academy, and I trained in Glencoe, Georgia, and I had a job that involved a lot of autonomy. I got to travel around the state, anywhere from Lake Okeechobee to the Panhandle, involved with auditing, primarily auditing the firearms, explosives, and alcohol industries, as well as tobacco.
When you say investigating, I mean you went into gun shops or different areas that were using chemicals for agriculture that could perhaps be used for bombs? Or
yeah, that was a large part of it. We wanted to make sure there was a audit trail in case a firearm showed up at a crime scene. And so I was at the end of the audit trail. I would make sure that gun dealers, both retailers and wholesalers, maintained the proper records, made sure that the weapons they had were weapons they were licensed to sell. When it came to explosives, I had dealings with the fireworks industry. And I will admit to this day, some of the most nerve-wracking work I did was walking into fireworks manufacturing facilities, because every now and again something bad happens and lives are lost. But I found it to be a gratifying job because it introduced me to criminal law and administrative law.
Well, what's interesting when I read your biography too, and including your time at law school, you basically worked your way through undergraduate and law school, right?
I did. I had a lot of great opportunities arise. I started out at St. Petersburg Junior College taking a job as a tutor. Then at USF, I saw an opportunity to be a court runner for the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I had a chance to get my foot in the door at a federal prosecutor's office at a really exciting time in the criminal justice system. That was the height of the cocaine trafficking in the 1980s. So I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office when they brought in major drug kingpins from around the country, including Carlos Lader.
Is that right? So, and you did that for how long?
I was a court runner for the U.S. Attorney's Office for about a year and a half, and that's what introduced me to the civil service exams, which I took to prepare for a job as a federal investigator. And fortunately, I was hired by ATF in early 1989.
So you go to law school, and what kind of classes attracted you at that time?
Well, again, I was interested in criminal law, but I also wanted to get some courtroom experience. And because Florida has student practice rules, I quickly signed up to take the prerequisites for that, which included Florida criminal practice and evidence.
Okay, and then you graduated. What year did you graduate?
I graduated in the spring of 1994.
All right. So, you know, when you go to law school, your perspective as a human being can change about people and events, and sometimes it's a transformative experience, which can be good or bad. How did you see that in your situation?
Well, what I found enjoyable about law school is it did teach you a new way of thinking. At first, I had a belief that it would be more of a trade school, that in law school they would show me, well, this is a summons, this is a complaint, this is a search warrant. And I actually made a request of my civil procedure instructor. I said, can I see some samples? And I was told, that's not what we do here. This isn't a trade school. We will teach you over the next 3 years to think like a lawyer. At the time, I didn't know what it meant, but I now do.
All right. So you graduate from law school, you have experience with ATF, you have a interest in criminal law, and so what do?
I apply at prosecutors' offices around the state of Florida, and I'm ultimately hired by the state attorney for the 12th Circuit, who at the time was Earl Moreland.
So tell us about your progress through the state attorney's office. Where do you start and how do you get advanced?
Mine was a typical experience. You start in county court with misdemeanors. You're handling petty thefts and DUI cases, simple batteries, and you work your way through the ranks. Eventually you do a rotation in the juvenile division, and then eventually you get to prosecute felony offenses.
All right. Now, you also achieved the distinction of becoming a division chief in Manatee County. Is that mostly where you spent your career as a prosecutor?
Yeah, I spent almost all of my 21 years at the Manatee County office of the state attorney's office. It's a 3-county circuit, and there are offices in DeSoto and Sarasota, but fate had it that I would spend the majority of the time in Manatee.
Well, our viewers may be interested in some of the more notorious cases that you had to handle as a prosecutor. Sometimes people misunderstand the role of the prosecutor. They think it's the job to get convictions. But what is the true role of a prosecutor?
The prosecutor's role truly is to seek justice. And I know from my experience, I was given the ability to make important decisions to determine whether or not there was sufficient evidence that I thought would support a conviction. Which doesn't mean that everybody who's arrested gets charged by the prosecutor. The prosecutor has to be selective, and indeed I was. But ultimately I got to work with police officers to try to pursue justice for victims and to protect the community.
And that means also, as a prosecutor, you have to disclose evidence that could excuse the defendant, or what we call exculpate the defendant, as well as information that could convict him, right?
Absolutely, and there were plenty of occasions where during the pendency of a case, an item would be uncovered that would undercut the ability to proceed as the prosecutor, but you don't conceal that, you provide that, because all the prosecutor is supposed to do is pursue justice.
Yeah, and so when you have a case that you're reviewing, and I think there's a process called pre-filing interviews, explain how that works.
Well, a prosecutor can get a case in one of two ways. Either the police can make an arrest and the case comes in subsequent to the arrest, or the police can withhold the arrest and submit what they call a capious request, which is
capious is like an arrest warrant.
Yes, and a capious is the equivalent of an arrest warrant that will only be issued after the prosecutor files formal charges. So typically in my office, we would do our own investigation above and beyond what the police would do, because the police only need probable cause to make a case, but the prosecutor knows that you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt to secure a conviction. So prosecutors bring in witnesses. Some you bring in by letter, and some you have to compel by subpoena.
And actually, the charging document, which is frequently an information, which is a piece of paper charging a defendant with a crime, requires a prosecutor to make a certain certification. And do you recall what that is?
Yes, the prosecutor swears or affirms that the information is filed in good faith based upon information that is either known to or sworn to the prosecutor to be true.
One of the things that distinguishes the prosecutorial side from the judicial side is that judges don't decide what cases, criminal cases, come to court. It's a separation of powers issue. The state attorney is authorized by law to make the charging decisions. Now, judges can throw cases out once they come in, but they have no decision as to who gets through that gate. And that's one of the distinctions of our separation of powers throughout the United States. So let's talk about some of those cases that you had to handle. What are the ones that they may have heard of, our audience, that you had a role in obtaining convictions?
Well, one case that was especially satisfying when we brought it to its conclusion was the prosecution of Vicente Beltran Moreno. He kidnapped a 13-year-old boy from a bus stop in Manatee County and planned to hold the boy for ransom. But fortunately, the young man kept his wits about him, concealed a safety pin in his mouth when first abducted, and then after he was bound, he used the safety pin to free himself from his bindings and shoelaces and duct tape. Well, the suspect saw on TV that his kidnapped victim had freed himself, so he took flight and left for Mexico. And this was an occasion where I was called out in the middle of the night, may have been midnight, maybe 1 in the morning, to help prepare a search warrant to go into the home where we believed the suspect had lived. And our beliefs were correct, and we secured the warrant and found in the home the suspect vehicle in the garage, a distinctive keychain for the vehicle that the boy had described, and a ransom note discarded in a trash can. And as a result of the discovery of the ransom note, we had handwriting analysis performed, identified the person who authored the note, which was his girlfriend, and ultimately brought the man to justice.
I think you also had a hand in the Delmer Smith prosecution. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Delmer Smith case was a case I'll never forget to my dying day. Delmer Smith was a very dangerous man, a convicted felon who had moved to Florida and who brutally murdered Kathleen Briles. And he murdered her by using an antique sewing machine and beating her to death while she was bound helpless in duct tape.
And what was the result of that trial?
Delmer Smith was found guilty of first-degree murder, and by a recommendation of 12-0, the jury recommended death. and the trial court judge agreed with the recommendation and sentenced him to death.
I believe he's got some motions pending with the Supreme Court now as a result of some U.S. Supreme Court rulings trying to have that death sentence revisited. But in any event, you won't have to mess with that since you're now a judge. So, all right, so you were a prosecutor for how many years?
21 years.
So you put your name in to be a judge. How does that work? What's the process?
It's a process a lot of people are unfamiliar with, but every judicial circuit has a judicial nominating commission, which is a group of both lawyers and non-lawyers appointed by the governor, and they vet
and the bar
applicants.
associations too.
And oh yes, the bar association is well represented, and they vet applicants, and then they determine which applicants will have interviews with the commission, and then they select a few of those who are interviewed for submission to the governor's office for further consideration.
So you've got to go in front of this committee and they ask you questions, then you got to wait for that result, and then if they get blessed with their recommendation, it goes to the governor. You have to go see the governor or somebody in his office?
You meet with lawyers on the governor's staff. I actually never had occasion to meet the governor, although he did personally place the phone call to tell me I was selected.
Okay, let's get a timeline on this because this is kind of interesting. When were you actually advised that you were going to be a judge? When did the call come from the governor? Can you recall roughly when that was?
I have a vivid recollection. It was October 30th, and it was just about 9 in the morning, and I was in the law library at the state attorney's office. And I had a feeling that would be the morning I'd get the call. And I saw the area code on the caller ID, and it wasn't a local number, so that confirmed my suspicions that I was getting a call from the governor.
So you didn't say, oh, that's somebody trying to call me to sell me something. You actually took the call.
I knew it was wise to take that call.
All right. So now how much time did you have between that date and when you actually took the bench and started being a judge?
My first day on the bench was December 2nd. So I had just a little over a month to bring to a close open matters I had at the state attorney's office, box up 21 years worth of legal research and memorabilia, and move south to Sarasota.
All right. Now, let's talk about how your assignment, you went from criminal to a civil division. And I should point out that we have 5 divisions in the circuit. We've got family law division, we've got the felony law division that you're well familiar with. We have probate guardianship, we have juvenile, and we have civil. And you got civil. And tell me how you prepared for that and what education you got from mentors or from judicial education.
Well, I was fortunate in that as a trial lawyer, I was familiar with the rules of evidence. And those rules apply, be it a criminal case or a civil case. So believe it or not, the trial experience is probably the easiest part of the transition. But no, there's a whole new body of law I had to learn about. And what's great is we have a wonderful judicial community, and every judge in the circuit has offered assistance to me. And it's a blessing to be able to walk down the hallway and ask questions of your fellow judges, many of whom have already been down this path. So they've been a wonderful resource. And then in addition, we have judicial colleges for new judges. And I already went to Phase 1 in Tallahassee in January, and I'll be attending Phase 2 in Orlando in March.
And in those classes, you cover the whole breadth of substantive law and procedure, and they kind of give you an overview of the whole process, and I've heard it's pretty intense.
It is intense. There are no days where they let you out of class early, that's for sure.
All right, so tell me about your family now. Are you married?
Yes, I am. I've been married to my wife Elizabeth since 2002. We actually met as a result of my prosecuting a criminal case. She enjoys this tale, and it's worth repeating. I was trying a murder in the summer of 2000, and as trial lawyers can appreciate, you neglect some of your other work when you're in trial. So I had a supervisor who happens to now be a judge, Ed Nicholas, who said, you know, I need to go through Brian's inbox to help him out. And he did just that, and he started setting appointments for me, those pre-filing interviews we spoke of. Well, he set one in a welfare fraud case with a young woman named Elizabeth Dickinson. And what my supervisor didn't know is that was a case I would typically not have to bring in a witness for a live interview. Those are well-documented investigations with witness affidavits and witness summaries. But by the time I realized that appointment was on my calendar, I couldn't call it off, and so I met young Ms. Dickinson. And after we met and I explained that she wasted a trip from Tampa, I asked my secretary if she thought Liz and I hit it off. And she said, sure, why not? And I ended up setting a lunch date for my next trip to Tampa a few weeks later. And well, now here we are, married.
2 kids?
13 years, and yes, 2 kids. My son David is 12, and my daughter Amelia is 11.
Okay, I want to get to some personal information here now. I want you to tell us about your car.
I get a lot of ribbing about the car. I have a 1995 Honda Civic that actually was my wife's purchase new 21 years ago. And when you marry and have kids, you can't have a sports car. I had one once, but no, I traded that in for a minivan. So the wife drives the minivan and I drive the Civic. The Civic just hit 204,000 miles. In the years we've been together, I've replaced the air conditioning blower motor on that myself 3 times. I've put in the starter and the radiator. I bought a radiator online and showed my 12-year-old son how to do that installation. Of course, plugs, wires, brake pads. She's still running.
And you do all that yourself?
I do.
You know, Sarasota, this college here actually has a very good mechanics department teaching kids. Maybe you could do that part-time sometime.
You know, I wouldn't mind taking a refresher class. I'm a shade tree mechanic at best.
Your dad taught you this?
My dad did, yes.
Okay. So what do you like to do for fun?
I'm quite involved with the Boy Scouts. My son transitioned from Webelos to Boy Scouts last year, and he's working on his tenderfoot rank. He's at the Scout rank now. And we do a lot of camping. In fact, this weekend I'll be at the Ocala National Forest at Camp Lenoche for a 20-mile hike.
Well, good luck with that. Now, let me just ask you this as kind of a winding up question. What would you like the lawyers and litigants to know when they come in your court? How are you going to approach them, and what's going to be your philosophy?
I want the people who come into the courtroom to know that I truly understand, especially for the litigants, that that day is the most important day you have going on at that point in your life, and that people will absolutely have a chance to be heard in the courtroom. But people also have to know that when folks leave the courtroom, at least half of them aren't going to be happy with the outcome. But I will do my best to rule from the law, that I will rigidly follow the dictates of the law, the statutory law and the decisional law, and everyone will have a chance to be heard, but my poll star will be, what does the law command me to do?
Well, Judge Iten, thank you for spending some time with us. I know you're busy because I go by your office at noon and I see you're in there cramming away and coming in early in the morning and staying late at night, which is what you have to do when you're doing civil work, I can tell you. So we appreciate your effort and your background, and we're lucky to have you as a judge. We're going to be interviewing the other 2 judges. We had 3 that were 3 vacancies. You're one. We're going to have the other 2 here with another program here shortly, and hopefully share the idea that these lawyers that get to be judges have exceptional skills, but they're really pretty much like the rest of us. And so with that, I'd like to thank our viewers for watching the show, and hopefully you'll find this educational, certainly insight into our new judge. And I appreciate your joining me on today's Law in Sarasota and the Education Channel. This is Lee Hayworth signing off for Law in Sarasota. Thank you.
For more than 36 years, the Community Foundation of Sarasota County has worked one-on-one with estate planning attorneys and their client to make a lasting impact through philanthropy. The Community Foundations safeguard the charitable legacies of donors to ensure that they continue for years to come. Visit www.cfsarasota.org for more information.
As a voluntary organization of over 900 lawyers and judges, and the leader of the local legal community, the Sarasota County Bar Association advances professionalism, promotes practice development, encourages public service, fosters fellowship, and supports access to legal services for all. Visit www.sarasotabar.com for more information or call 941-861-8180.